So we were asked, this program has been for the tough issues, how do you apply the Dhamma to this? It started with the pandemic, and we still try to really look at how to apply Dhamma to some of the toughest things that we face in life, whether it's personal or societal, global. And so there was a request to talk about how to hold, how to practice with what's happening right now in the Middle East. And so I wanted to talk about some of the Buddhist teachings around this to give us a window into how we might be with our feelings, with what we experience, with what's coming to us from the media, and also how to practice. So I'm going to actually share my notes with you. And I also want to bring up a sutta that we're going to look at from the Sutta Nipata. So I'm going to quickly find that. I'm calling this a world at war. It's not the whole world at the moment, but every place in the world has experienced war, or maybe very close to it. And what is the approach to take as a practitioner? So could you find that 1:4? Oh, we're close to that 1:4:15. I'll get there in a second. So the first thing. So first of all, I know even from far, far away from the actual experience of what's happening in the Middle East right now, we feel it to some degree. Watching the news, listening, having compassion for everyone involved. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But when we really look at the way the world is, then what we notice is that this happens again and again and again, everywhere in the world. And some of us have grown up in places where we haven't had war or conflict directly in our homeland, our area, but we know that it's possible. So I want to go to the sutta in the Sutta Nipata, number 415, and look at the Buddha's experience. So I hope to not make you dizzy getting there, but here we are. It's called Taking Up Arms. Now remember that the Buddha was born into the warrior caste in India 2,500 years ago. And very little has changed in a sense. I mean, he was in the warrior noble strata of society, and therefore his family had a certain political power, and also it's probably almost for sure he was trained in warfare. And he said, peril stems from those who take up arms. Just look at people in conflict. I shall extol how I came to be stirred with a sense of urgency. So regardless of whatever stories we heard about the Buddha and what motivated him to leave the home life and search for a way out of suffering, this is what he said about it. He saw that whenever there's war, whenever there's fighting, that you can see the problem, and it stirred up a sense of urgency for him to find a way out. I saw this population flounder like a fish in a little puddle. Seeing them fight each other, fear came upon me. The world around was hollow. All directions were in turmoil. Wanting a home for myself, I saw nowhere unsettled. And with this, there's a little footnote that I think is useful. This is the Pali, osita, and the word osana is in the next line, and it conveys both occupancy and end in the sense of a place of rest at the end of a journey. And so there's no place where you can rest when there's all this turmoil and conflict. Yet even in their settlement, they fight. Seeing that, I grew uneasy. Then I saw the dart there, so hard to see, stuck in the heart. When struck by that dart, you run around in all directions. But when the same dart has been plucked out, you neither run around nor sink down. Excuse me. So what's the dart? You probably already know. The dart is attachment, greed, hatred, and delusion. It's the desire for things to be different than they are. The desire for the world to be different than it is. When we have that, we run around in all directions. When that's gone, we don't run around anymore. We don't sink down into despair. And there's this, on that topic, the trainings are recited, and there's a footnote here. This was probably a statement by whoever was reciting, not really part of what the Buddha was saying. And it means like that topic is the extraction of the dart. So it says here, for the remainder of the sutta gives practical guidelines, and we'll see how practical we think they are. So this is what the Buddha says about it. Whatever attachments there are in the world, don't pursue them. Having pierced through sensual pleasures in every way, train yourself for quenching. So train yourself for awakening, for complete peace. Be truthful, not rude, free of deceit and rid of slander. Without anger, a sage would cross over the evils of greed and avarice. Prevail over sleepiness, sloth, and drowsiness. Don't abide in negligence. A person intent on quenching would not stand for arrogance. Don't be led into lying or get caught up in fondness for form. Completely understand conceit and desist from hasty conduct. Don't relish the old or welcome the new. Don't grieve for what is running out or get attached to things that pull you in. Greed, I say, is the great flood, and longing is the current. The basis, the compulsion, the swamp of sensuality so hard to get past. The sage never strays from the truth. The Brahmin stands firm on the shore. Having given up everything, they're said to be at peace. They have truly known they're a knowledge master, understanding the teaching, they're independent. They rightly proceed in the world, not coveting anything here. One has crossed over sensuality here, the snare in the world so hard to get past, grieves not nor hopes. They've cut the strings, they're no longer bound. What came before, let wither away, and after, let there be nothing. If you don't grasp at the middle, you'll live at peace. So this is like, let go of the past and let go of the future. And don't grasp at this present moment either, just live at peace. One who has no sense of ownership in the whole realm of name and form does not grieve for that which is not. They suffer no loss in the world. If you don't think anything of anything as belonging to yourself or others, not finding anything to be mine, you won't grieve, thinking I don't have it. Not bitter, not fawning, unstirred, everywhere even. When asked about one who is unshakable, I declare that that is the benefit. For the unstirred who understand, there's no performance of deeds. Desisting from instigation, they see sanctuary everywhere. A sage doesn't speak of themselves as being among superiors, inferiors, or equals. Peaceful, rid of stinginess, they neither take nor reject. So there's some things here that I think really echo what we heard when we went to Thailand to visit Ajahn Ganha. He said, zero out the past. Like, don't think at all about the past. And be in the present moment, but it is with that lack of attachment. So it's really, the advice here, of course, is to practice in a way that we awaken. And what do we awaken to? We awaken to the reality that there's nothing that we can call me or mine. And when we truly take that in, we embody it, we live it, we know it deeply, then we don't suffer around what we might lose or what we might have lost, or what we might gain or what we might have gained. It's not, we know that that's not anything more than an illusion. So this all sounds pretty kind of lofty, you know. We might feel like we've come to some understanding of this, and we see that when we let go, we actually feel relief. But how do we square this up with what the Buddha was talking about, this idea that there's no real peace in the world, and this is finding peace in ourselves. So let's look at the specifics. When we're in the midst of the things that come into our awareness that are disturbing or scary, how do we work with it? How do we work with the feelings that come up? First of all, we have to feel them. We don't want to be bypassing anything if we act like, oh, it's not important, either it's not in my backyard, or some other glib way of saying, like we could spiritually, we could say, oh yeah, well, this happens all the time and it's just the way the world is. If we just gloss over it, we're not really taking things in. We're not really dealing with our own feelings. And we can't wake up that way. That's the path of delusion. But we also want to be sure we're not getting overwhelmed by the feelings, by grief or by fear, because that's also not the way. Instead, we have to be present with those feelings, not adding anything onto them, but taking care of them and healing our own hearts. So the book Steve showed us, the one I'm focusing, this is one method of how to do that, how to be present with what we feel and work with what we're really attached to. What is it that we want to have be different, and why? And there are all kinds of things that we can, beliefs that we can pick up and carry based on what we hear in the news, and we can have ideas about who's right and who's wrong and all of those things, but in the end of the day, what we need to do as practitioners is really look at what we're experiencing, what we're still attached to in ourselves, and also how do we want to live. And some this week in our WhatsApp group, Divya referred to a talk that, or a Q&A that Ajahn Suchard had, and there was a piece where he talked about the 4 requisites of the mind. And Ayya Chitananda says that there's a sutta that talks about this, but I couldn't find it, so I don't know if anyone else knows about it, they can let me know. But we're going to look at this 4 requisites of the mind. You know, like there are 4 requisites for the body: food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And then this teaching is about the 4 requisites of the mind that are kind of parallel to those 4 requisites of the body. And this is a way that we can look at how do I feed the mind? How do I clothe the mind? How do I give it shelter? How do I give it medicine? And when we do that, this is a wonderful way to think about how we can train the mind to be resilient and present and awakened. So the first thing, this food for the mind, is actually generosity, charity, kindness. That when we're kind to others, when we help others, it helps the mind really feel happy. It brings that quality of goodness into the mind that really is the food for the mind. So when we come up against, or we come in contact with these kinds of very, very difficult situations, we want to give help where we can. We also want to protect the mind, like the clothing. The physical body is protected by clothing, and the mind is protected by virtue. So we want to really pay attention to our own virtue. And also the Buddha talked about, of course, the commitment to the 5 precepts, the first one of which is to not kill, and then also speaking out against killing. So in every possible way, put that forward in the world, knowing that whatever the reason might be, there's this heavy karma that comes with killing. And that really the one who kills is in more danger than the one who's killed, because we leave this world with whatever actions we've taken. So to kill, to make other people kill, to encourage killing, the Buddha would say this is really what brings us our own misery. The third requisite for the mind is meditation, samadhi, becoming calm and steady in the mind, and that's the mind's real shelter. And the medicine for the mind is wisdom. We heal the mind with the Dhamma. And so this is exactly what we're talking about when we say, okay, we need to feel what we feel, but not add anything to it, take care of it, heal our own hearts. And then we're in a position to be much more helpful and supportive to everyone around us. And when we do that, of course, we also use the Brahma Viharas that, especially compassion for everyone involved in whatever conflict there is. Everyone suffers in it. Ajahn Gana said that when people fight, they're fighting over garbage. I know that might be hard to believe because we think, well, aren't we fighting for freedom or fighting for safety or something? But the reality is you don't get safety from aggression. It's like I've got the Dhammapada verse 5 there. For never is hatred settled by hate, it's only settled by love. This is the eternal truth. That's Bhante Sajato's translation, and then the one below it, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is eternal law. That's Bhante Buddharakkhita's translation. And every religion has this kind of idea at its core. It's like Ajahn Ganad was saying quite frequently when we were there, that religion, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism or Islam, they all come down to the same thing. The real religion is beyond the names of religions. This is the kind of thing that is the real religion. He said, if we're ever fighting, we're not really doing the real religion. So of course, the other Brahmavihara that's important in this kind of situation is equanimity. It's the wisdom factor of Brahmaviharas. It's the peacefulness, the calm, that still we have compassion, but we know that whenever the human beings are fighting, it's one more episode in an endless string of episodes. And we know that it's only through love that it can be put to rest. So what do? We have to put more emphasis on our own virtue, put more emphasis on love, and set the clear intention that nothing will ever pull us off that course. Whatever happens, we don't resort to aggression. We resort to compassion, to stability of mind, to really fulfilling our own understanding of non-self. So that's what I wanted to share. And I'm interested in hearing what you think, what your own experience is. Do you agree? Yes, Suzanne?
I don't know if you're ready to talk about the media, but that's what's coming into my mind and heart. I have an independent radio show about peace. And so I have a lot of information about media literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems to me, I know over the course of human history, that people have not been exposed to global media like we are today.
Right.
So, that's my view, that what I do is I only check the news maybe once a week.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that's what this heart and mind can be with.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your understanding is of the media and how to take it in, almost like we take in food.
Well, I agree with you, Susan.
And also, I just want to say one more thing. This was super helpful to see the sutta and your notes, and that is just so generous. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Suzanne. I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's so important to be aware of what we're taking in. The Buddha talked a lot about sense restraint, and it's exactly in that area, like to recognize how much we're reading, how much we're listening, how much we're watching, and what effect it's having on the mind. Because of course it's good to know what's happening, but if we keep kind of coming back to it over and over again, and we keep ruminating over what we see as the horrors of what can be happening in the world, then we are like stoking up the fire of the feelings. And we need to look at how much is it helpful? How much of that is really helpful, and where does it cross a line and become obsessive or out of balance? And when we're dealing with media, we never know what the truth really is. I mean, we can have a sense of what we think is happening, but there's no way even for very well-meaning news people how can they possibly give us the full kind of understanding of what's happening? So we always need to kind of keep that in mind. We really don't know the whole story. Sometimes I think about this on a much more personal level, like any of us who have families who, somewhere in the family there's a conflict, or there's someone in the family who's not behaving the way we would want them to behave, or something like that. It can be hard to even know exactly what's going on, and it's right there in your own life. We have to have enough generosity of heart to allow for the possibility that there's much more happening than we realize. And there may be much more good, or much more, what do I want to say, vulnerability, or reasons behind the way people behave than we understand, because we don't know. So that's another thing to consider. And I agree with finding the right way to limit the input, because it's so pervasive in our world now. We listen to the radio news on the National Public Radio once in a while, just to know kind of what's being said, so we can help with what people are dealing with. But if I sat down to watch television news every night, I think it would be a very toxic experience for me. So I think it's important to really take care with what we consume. I mean, we want to be able to actually calm the mind when we sit to meditate. Everything that we do when we're not in meditation has an effect on our ability to do that. How much good can we be in the world if we're so agitated and upset? So how can we know what's happening without having a negative effect that actually clouds the mind further, brings up anger, rage, fear, any kind of those mental states that are actually not helpful?
Yes, thank you. It is a confusing balance in this mind of like dispassion versus caring, and then hearing people like, oh, don't you care? It's just confusing. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's not like balance is ever perfect. Balance is one of those things that you get it a little far too this way, you get it a little too far that way. And it's necessary to kind of keep bringing it back to a balance point. It's okay to range one way or the other. We know where the edges are, but then we come back. So there's a message in the chat. I'm glad to see speaking against killing included in your notes. I think talking about it and our feelings about it is important. Yeah. We have to be sensitive to when talking about it is helpful and when it's also bringing more agitation, fear, anger. We want to be able to talk about it in contexts where it's not going to have a negative result. So that depends on who we're talking to and how it feels to talk about it. Sometimes we can think about something in one way, but as soon as we put it into words, it takes on a different sense. And we want to make sure that that's a positive sense. If we can feel when we start talking about it that we're getting revved up in a way that's not wholesome, then we might just pause, see what it is that would be best to do. So I hope that the understanding can be clear that we don't want to avoid feeling. We want to be present with what arises, but we also want to be careful not to increase the negativity and the unwholesome mental states. We want to calm those mental states, and we want to be clear and wise, present, but also have those wholesome mental states be the ground that we rest on. Speaking out of compassion, that's right. Speaking from the place of compassion and wisdom.
I have a question. I can't figure out on this iPad how to put my hand up.
It's okay, you did the job.
Okay. At the beginning, when you were talking about world events, one of the things that you said is that it's important to feel your feelings. And then later you mentioned equanimity and, understanding that this is one episode in an endless string of episodes. And generally, that's been my response when I hear something in the news. I think, oh, it could be no other way. It's karma. And also the idea that I could pick up the newspaper or whatever source of news media any given day and hear the same thing. But for me, there's also a little feeling of complacency in that. That I'm not really involved. And I don't know if that's wise or unwise.
So this is a very important question, I think, because, the Buddha, what we're doing here, all of us, is we're practicing for awakening. And what does that mean? It means that we are absolutely clear about the way things actually are, and we're free from attachment, free from suffering. That, what happens then is this boundless love and compassion for all beings, this complete clarity about there not being a self here or there or anywhere, not a personal, me or mine. So the Buddha said that the way that happens is that we develop a kind of generosity in ourselves where we don't want to hold on to anything. We're open-handed and freely giving, where we have this moral virtue that is absolutely impeccable. We wouldn't want to harm anyone in any way, intentionally, ever. Killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, drinking alcohol or drugs to make us like not mindful, not caring. We would never want to do any of those things. And it goes a lot deeper than that. Virtue, really purifying the mind. And then there's meditation. And so when the Buddha talks about, like first you practice virtue, and from that you have no regrets. And then you feel some joy because of that. And then you start to get calm and your body becomes tranquil and you feel piti running through it and happiness. You have this spiritual uplift. And eventually through happiness and joy, you come to samadhi and the mind becomes still and peaceful. Possibly more still and peaceful than you could have ever imagined before that. And it's from right there that the wisdom arises to see the way things actually are. And what does that mean? That means we see that the world is in conflict. We see that the whole setup in this world is for living beings to be killing and eating other living beings. This is the way living beings survive. Consider that. That's the system. And once we see that there isn't any kind of sensual pleasure that's actually going to bring happiness and contentment that's lasting, we become disgusted with the world. Nibbida arises. We don't want it anymore. Then viraga. We just don't want any of it anymore. That dispassion. But it also, what's so interesting is that there's also this incredible love that arises for every being, for all beings. It's absolutely boundless, limitless. So at the same time that we reject the world, we have this feeling of love. So when we are saying, oh, that's just another war, that's just another whatever, and we're not really there feeling it, there is some and what's the word I'm looking for? We're a bit not completely in it, we're not really taking it in. And we want to reflect in our practice about reality so that we do take it in. Like when I was on retreat in Australia and I'm walking through the forest and I'm seeing living beings attacking other living beings to kill them, to eat them, to mate with them against their will. To really let that come in, let that enter, but not in a way that brings us down. It doesn't cause us to become dark and sullen. Instead, it's wow, this is the way it is. Do I really want to participate in this? Do I really want to be like that too, in my own way as a human being? No. So this disillusionment, sometimes it's called, this starts to really hit home. And we're not removed from the world in a way that's I can't find the right word here. I bet some of you know what I'm thinking.
It's like deflecting in a way, or just not taking it in.
Yeah, right. Apathetic, something like that. So it's not like that. How to be really engaged in the present moment, how to recognize what we feel, but it's also not being caught up in it. And it's that's the balance. So it's true Linda, that it's a challenge to really like know ourselves. Am I kind of just disassociating from this? Or do I really get it? Do I really, see the suffering that people are experiencing and care about it, but not from a place of being pulled down into it? So this is another very important distinction around compassion, because the word compassion in English is like you're feeling it with the person. To completely take it in, but to also come from a place of spiritual peace, and yet the wish for their suffering to end. So it's an interesting, different place, but it comes with awakening. And we need to put the causes and conditions in for that to happen. And I think what that means is if we feel like we're kind of glossing it over, then kind of like take a more closer look and really think about what would it feel like if this was happening to my family right now? How would I deal with it? How would I work with it? Notice the tendency to start to panic or to feel really super sad. And then I'm like looking at the attachment there. So this is all part of the practice ground, I think. Yeah, Philip.
One thing that I was kind of hoping to see on that list, like maybe it's implied, is also the role of your confidence in your own development. Because I feel like maybe people who are like self-conscious would relate to this, but if you don't have the confidence that your intentions are, like we're all human, we're gonna make mistakes, but if you have the confidence in your intentions, then you won't feel like, oh, I'm being uncaring by not engaging in this, or I'm saying something, but maybe it's not pure. Like, I have nothing to do with this conflict. I'm just like being opinionated. Sometimes there's like those extremes, but then if you have the confidence, then I think it eventually it does come through. Like, well, it's one of those things where you gotta like be good with yourself before you can be good to others, like that kind of thing. I guess this goes for just your practice in general. Like once you get your confidence up, then things you don't feel so pulled down by things. Like whether you feel like you're doing too little or too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like am I doing the right thing, or am I being uncaring by not doing anything? One of the things that I feel like has been most helpful for me is there's a certain time where I do something and I don't even know if it's gonna help or not. Like I have no like conceptual, oh, I know for sure by doing this or saying something it's gonna help. But there's a certain kind of situation where I know, I don't know, but I'm gonna do something like I feel like this is the right thing to do or say right now. And over time I feel like people understand you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, I know you're just trying to help, like, and it comes through eventually. And that comes with like there's a certain confidence that comes from that. Like, I'm not trying, like I see this conflict, I don't know, but sometimes my mind gets to a place where it's calm enough to know, I think this might help. Like I'm trying to do something, and hopefully it won't hurt.
Yeah. No, you make a few good points there, I think. So first, putting our confidence in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And when we want to say something or take action, checking on whether what we're saying or doing really is in accord with what the Buddha taught. That's the first place to go for confidence. And then the more we see how, acting in a virtuous way, good intentions, it's important that our intentions are good, but we also have to look at the results. And so like what you're saying is you see the result, you try something, do the best thing that you can, in the time in that moment. And then you see how the results are. And then that, then you start to learn, what really can help, what doesn't work so well, because maybe no matter how we're thinking of it, it could be misperceived or come across in a different way. And this kind of idea of confidence, I think, relates a little bit to that very last part of the sutta, where the Buddha said, when you're fully enlightened, you don't think of yourself as above or below or equal to anyone. It's not, you're stepping outside of all of that. Well, of course, until we're fully enlightened, we're still operating in that kind of space. But we can actually do the best thing that we can see from the suttas, from the Buddhist teachings, or from the practice. And then we can just start to learn more and more how to deal with any kind of arrogance or self deprecation, or thinking we're better or worse or something like that, because it's like we gain confidence, and then we don't have to make those comparisons so much anymore. Even arrogance, it comes out of a lack of confidence. Can you speak about, what is the top part of that?
They don't want their name mentioned on the recording.
Okay, can you speak about activism? To me, there can be both wholesome and unwholesome motivations, even for signing petitions against killing. For example, I notice in a community that I'm part of, a lot of righteous anger and even desire to kill the oppressor, which goes against the desire for peace. I do participate in speaking out against killing, but even that seems to come with some potential for being associated with foolish or unwholesome behavior, intention, even if my intentions are good. So yeah, sometimes the mind is complicated, but we have to try to simplify it by being truthful as much as we can. If we're devoted to truth, and we keep coming back to looking, is there something I need to purify in my own mind? How other people see us has to do with their mind to a large degree. And we can't account for that. Like was just being said, sometimes we have to take an action, seeing that this is something that we can do, that's we're doing with a wholesome intention. And if we discover that there's something not so wholesome in it, we have to purify that. Be honest with ourselves for why we are having that, selfish idea or that negativity, and then come back to that and try to understand our own mind and purify it. And to recognize that we're all learning. We're none of us have, at least I can say for myself, I'm not an arahant. I have to really be honest with myself about what I feel, what my tendencies are, what my conditioning is, and try to just gradually purify it without being harsh, without, being, oh dear, there's that again, but to just be patient and continue to work through it. So activism, do the best you can with the purest intentions you can, and where you see problems, try to correct them in ourselves or in our interactions with others. If there's a group that you've participated in and you find that people are becoming hostile or angry or aggressive, walk away. There's never going to be any real help coming from that place. We think sometimes that that's going to make progress, but in the end it doesn't. It just creates more hatred. So we have these beautiful teachings and these beautiful tools to rely on. How to live in relationship with everyone in our life from a place of generosity and kindness, truthfulness, caring. And I'm fascinated with this idea that the Buddha used the same words for generosity as he did for enlightenment, learning how to give, learning how to let go. So it's like everything we do in our practice, that's the way our course is set. And then we continue on that course and we gradually learn as we go. And then there's things that happen along the way that we can't control that help to bring more wisdom because we've been moving forward step by step, practicing meditation, practicing sila, developing wisdom. And when something happens and we make a mistake or we have some bad intentions arising, this is part of the reality of development. And then if we have to make amends to someone, we do that. If we have to, correct our behavior, we do that to the best of our ability, without harshness. And when we think about other people and what they're doing, just know the wholesome from the unwholesome. Not to condemn the individual, but to recognize that people can get caught up in doing unwholesome things. We want to try our best to stay out of that ourselves. I hope that answered the question. What do you think?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, I was still chewing on what Philip was saying a little bit too. And I like the idea that when you have clarity around the situation and enough wisdom because of the clarity, using the Dhamma, confidence is natural. It's like that is the result of the clarity and the wisdom. You don't have to have any doubts that your intentions are bad. And then the same thing with the second question. It's like if you get enough clarity around it, you'll know what your mind is doing. You'll know what's wholesome and not wholesome. It'll be, you'll have the confidence naturally that you know what your mind is up to, and you'll know what the right thing really is. And things are not black and white, as Philip was mentioning too. Like everybody does stuff, there's unwholesome mixed in with the wholesome, and not to like feel bad about it, but to see it and course correct. You're like, oh, unwholesome. No. Yeah. I don't know. You're the articulate one, Dhamma. You say things. You say things.
Yes, Joyce.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm going to try. My thoughts are not 100% formulated because this is a very important issue for me. So something that is really a huge part of this for me is the fact that not only is our country complicit, it is what's allowing it to happen. And this is very painful to me. And the citizens of this country seem in large part, majority, to be opposed to it. And there's nothing that we can do in our democracy to do that. It's very painful. And the media here, including, the corporate media, is very biased. toward the aggressor at this point, and that includes NPR. And if you listen to independent media, you'll see a different story. And I have huge compassion coming up all the time for what's happening there. It's really, really painful. And I'm not, at the peak of the practice of virtue, but I really work on it and have been for a very long time. And I'm just going to show you, I don't know if it's going to come out. Maybe I'll just read it to you, but I'm just going to hold up the sign that I've been carrying since the Iraq War. I don't know if oh yeah, I could be able to read it. Anyway, it's a paraphrase of something that the Buddha said, but violence never ceases by violence, but by love alone is healed. This is an ancient and eternal law. That's where I'm coming from. I don't want to get in arguments with people. Everybody has their opinion, but we're not getting the truth about what's happening. And this is so painful to be happening at this time in our lives. And I realize humans are humans and all that kind of thing. And I don't know, I shouldn't probably yammer on anymore. I'm actually afraid to even speak in public. And so I do go to some events around this, and I just hold my space. I don't really get into shouting and anger and all that kind of thing. I'm just holding my little sign. And well, then I also have the whole world is watching, but it's more of a peaceful nature of, and I know it's not going to happen in our lifetimes, just wanting humans with their great intelligence to wake up and yeah, I know that's not possible. So I don't know what you can do to help ease my heart, but anyway, I'm really glad that you took the time and made the effort to talk about this topic.
Yeah.
Because not only is the complicity of our government adding to the violence in the world, it is jeopardizing the future of this country as well. Because our leader will likely not get reelected, and I hate to think what else could happen. And they're making these choices. They are making these choices despite people not wanting this to be happening. So I know I'm going off into political world, but I just want you to know something about the source of my pain.
Yeah, I understand, Joyce.
And I feel just great compassion for everybody who is suffering there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The quote you read, of course, is the same one that is in my notes. It's a different translation a little bit, but it's the same as Dhammapada, verse 5. It's right there at the beginning. And it's true. This is the eternal law. This has always been true. It's always going to be true. And we all have access to it. Every religion has a statement like this in it. And yet, of course, we, meaning the human beings in the world, don't act that way. Because there's this huge influence of greed, hatred, and delusion. And I can empathize with your situation, your experience of feeling like there's an outcry from human beings all over the place for people to stop fighting. But it doesn't work. And I really got a dose of this when I used to get very involved in climate change activism and going to the big marches in Washington, D.C. and New York City, and finding out that it really didn't have that much of an impact, even though thousands and thousands of people showed up. And it's not just, it is our government, but it's every government. And it's how it unfolds in the world. And yes, in a democratic country, you have maybe some influence. I think there is some influence. We do want to vote in a way that feels like is consistent with our own conscience and our practice. But we have to accept the reality that most of the time, it doesn't seem like these demonstrations and challenges to the course that has been set really makes very much difference. So my recommendation is don't partake in the media so much, even in the independent media. Try to remember that this is the same story again and again, and really work with developing the acceptance of samsara being the way it is. It's see what you can do to transform the inner hurt into a kind of deep understanding, wisdom, and acceptance that helps the mind to awaken. It's fine to speak out. It's good to let them know, everyone know, that we really want peace and happiness in the world. And that's the way most people are. You want to be at home, happy with your children, safe from danger. But then when societies believe that the only way to be safe from danger is to attack someone else, it just perpetuates the same problem. And yet, there's no real end to it in this world. So to really allow that, recognizing that's what we're dealing with, and to limit the amount of exposure we make, the exposure to the mind that we have on these issues, so we can be at peace internally. Serena?
I don't know if this will help, but I'm just remembering a conversation once when I was at Abhayagiri speaking with Ajahn Pasano, and 911 came up. I don't remember if it was right around that time or not, probably was. And he said that someone came running up to him all upset saying, Ajahn, did you hear the news yet? And he said, yes, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And, everyone will have their idea what he meant by that. But for me, it meant that he was focusing on the Buddhist truth of the way it is in the human condition. And the specifics weren't that important because it comes down to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, and reflecting on accepting the way it is and what we can do to be at peace within ourselves of our human condition.
Yeah, and to see like someone like Ajahn Pasano and how much that inner peace in him gets spread to everyone in that community, and that community spreading out into the world. You can really feel it when you're there on the property. You can really feel it through our connections with the monks and others. It does matter that our minds are at peace. And it also matters that we are engaged in care. And I think if we are really gonna stay in healthy form, then we give our mind those 4 requisites. we do charitable things and give the mind that sense of happiness from giving. And we give the mind, the reflection and the emphasis on virtue. And we practice meditation. And we develop wisdom. We don't let ourselves go into kind of a bypassing of apathy. We stay present, but we got to give the mind those requisites. Yeah. And whatever we go through, whatever happens, we'll have that resilience, the peace and the wisdom reside within. And no one can take that away from you. That part's up to us. Joyce?
Just a little quickie. I think one of the things that's a challenge for me is that I don't have the support that I need. I feel really lost in the world because most people that I see during the week are not Buddhists and are not carrying this. And after 9/11, I was with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and we were really devoted to providing a place of solitude and meditation at both ends of the march. And we marched with other Buddhists, and we were really together holding that compassion and care. And that's what's lacking right now. And I thank you, Serena, for telling your story about Ajahn Pasano. That was really helpful to me. And also this recognition that we're in samsara. I don't know, somehow that just came through when you mentioned it. So thank you. This has been helpful. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I think we should chant a blessing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate everyone's practice. As always, I know that we all are, working these issues through in our own minds and hearts. And we want to know, the reality is that the Buddha really covered everything in his teachings, and we have the resources that we need there. I can empathize with people, we aren't all able to be around other practitioners with the same teachings and the same views all the time, and that does help. But we can get together at least online and sometimes in person and really give each other support. It's always possible too. I know some of you have a Kalyanamitta within the community that you meet with regularly, and if someone wants that, maybe you can just maybe connect with somebody that feels resonant with you. There might be other ways to get some more friendship on the path. So we're going to chant a blessing, and I want you to all take really good care of your hearts. And we'll probably see you on Monday if you can join us for the day long. Starting the new year out right as best we can. So everyone, this is for everyone, everywhere who's experiencing sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Buddhas, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Dhamma, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Sanghā, may you ever be well. Take care, everyone.